Oh, I see that we've hit our maximum. So Aziz is actually connecting us to the live stream on Facebook. So hopefully people that can't join us on the live stream here on Zoom will be able to see us soon on Facebook. So I guess we'll start and say hello to everyone. And thank you again for joining another episode of Crossing Boundaries, Global Connections and Conversations. As I said, I'm Kim, one and only, Director of Operations at MEJDI Tours, streaming to you from Tel Aviv, Israel. And together with me is one of our amazing co-founders, Aziz Abusera. Thanks again for everyone that is joining us. Aziz, you want to say hello?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many people joining to see Ramzi and Morgie. I'm sure some of you have traveled with them, and that's, I think, part of the reason we having them here. They are two of our most experienced tour guides who've been working with MEJDI for quite a long time. And Morgie, your actual name is Sharon Morgenstern. And she's Jewish, she's Israeli, and she will give us, through the tour, she'll get us some of that narrative. And then Ramzi Salsa, we were teasing him earlier that he would be very popular in Latin America. He's in the wrong region with that awesome last name. And the two of them will take us through a tour of Jerusalem today, where we are going to learn kind of how the idea of having two tour guides working together manifests itself. And these two have worked obviously together. So Morgie, I'll start with you. When you two stand together and you're about to do a dual narrative tour, how do you start? What's your opening speech? How do you prepare your group, the tourists who are coming with you, to this kind of experience?
Well, this week we start like this, but no, seriously.
I like the logo, by the way. I wonder what logo is that?
It's the MEJDI shirt. Yes.
Team MEJDI.
Team MEJDI. Actually, we would introduce ourselves a little bit about who we are. I grew up in America. I came to Israel 37 years ago and soon realized this was home. And this is where I've had the best job in the world, sharing this wonderful land with various people from all over. And that as you've chosen to come with the MEJDI tour, this is a multi-narrative tour. And let's be honest, we all have our agendas, we all have our narratives. And the fact that you've come on this tour means you're willing to challenge yourself to be open to hear a different narrative, one that you may not be comfortable with, that you may not agree with. And to be, what I would suggest would be helpful is to be open and understand there is no black and white. There is no right or wrong, yes or no. Everyone has narratives, and each narrative has a truth. And to have that in mind as we go through the tour.
Thanks, Morgie. Ramzi, would you add to that after Morgie gives that opening speech?
Sure, I do approximately the thing. I present from where I come, my background, my studies, and I always confirm that are all different from each other, both tour guides and the clients as well. And we might represent ourselves as we might represent our people well, but we remain different, and this difference should enrich our dual narrative.
And usually you have very nice scenery to use actually to open your tours up to your travelers. And today we're going to be using this scenery, the Mount of Olives, and that's where we're going to be touring. So we'll use pictures along the way to have this sort of virtual tour. And we'll, again, like usual, go to questions in the end. And I'd like you, Ramzi, to get us started. And if you can tell us a little bit about what you like about this site specifically, and if you can introduce us particularly to the Christian view.
Okay, what we can see is the Mount of Olives, mainly the Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of All Nations, and upper we can see the Mary Magdalene Church, and upper we can see some houses. Behind some houses we cannot see from here. We have two churches, the Ascension Church or the Ascension Shrine, and which is next to the Paternoster Church. I usually spend one morning with my clients in this area, talking about Jesus, as the Mount of Olives is too much important for us Christians. At the Garden of Gethsemane, it was the last hours of Jesus when he was arrested. But before that, he did the way from up to down next to the city. And this is the Palm Sunday Road that all pilgrims from all over the world like to join on the Palm Sunday. And on the right side, going down from up to down, there's the Dominus Flevit Church, from where Jesus have seen this view before us 2,000 years ago. In front of him was the what is called the Temple Mount. Nowadays we have the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and also we can see the other churches of the old city. And at the end of his life on the earth, Jesus brought for the last hour his apostles, and from there he went to the heavens, and he left them, and it was their time to go and preach the whole word of what he was teaching them.
Mute myself. Okay, Morgie, how about you? So he just told us a bit of the Christian narrative. What do you continue with?
Well, there are several things. One is what we're looking at. On the Temple Mount itself is a Jewish cemetery, but it also go back a second. Sorry, where the arrow was right there. Where the arrow is, that's the city of David, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But directly below where we would be standing is a Jewish cemetery that Jews have been dying to get into for 3,000 years. That many Jews believe the Messiah will come from the east. That's a picture of the cemetery. And the Jews there want to get first dibs. Unfortunately, during the time that this area was under Jordanian rule, much of that cemetery was desecrated. Much of it has been restored. And it's still a functioning cemetery and part of the Jewish connection. Way down in the bottom, there are some tombs from about 3,000 years ago. Some discussion is exactly who's buried there. Some say Avshalom, one of David's sons. There's some academic discussion about that. But off to the left is the city of David. And David is the one that brings Jerusalem onto the map 3,000 years ago, making it the cultural, political, religious, economic, and military center for the Jews. Shortly thereafter, David's son Solomon will build the temple of the Jews up on the Temple Mount. So for years, there is a Jewish connection, and we can go back to Abraham and his connection. According to many traditions, Mount Moriah is where the Dome of the Rock sits today, even though in the Bible, it doesn't give us longitude or latitude, but most people will say that's where it is. And the temple of the Jews stood there 3,000 years ago, was destroyed. Another temple is built, gets destroyed. And for many, many Jews, where the Dome of the Rock, that platform that was built 2,000 years ago by Herod, that is the most holy site for many Jews all over the world. In fact, no matter where you are in the world, you face that area that we call the Temple Mount when you pray. Okay.
Well, Ramzi, can you tell us a little bit more about Al-Aqsa Mosque? So Palestinians were rarely or almost never refer to it as the Temple Mount. It actually, if you are guiding there and you refer to it as Temple Mount, the local authorities, the Waqf there would be very upset with you. We refer to it as Al-Aqsa Mosque. So what is Al-Aqsa Mosque? Why is this site important for both Christians and Muslims?
Well, I myself, when I present the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I begin first with the Jewish narrative, as here was the temple built first by King Solomon, and second temple as Jews believe, and as Christians believe that Jesus was coming to the temple and was preaching and was teaching the crowds that they were following him. So it's also an important place for Christians and Jews as well. And it is also very holy for the Muslims, not because of Abraham and his sacrifice of his son, according to Judaism, Isaac, but according to Islam, Ishmael, because according to Islam, this happened in Mecca. So the importance comes from the night journey of Prophet Muhammad of Islam, when he came to Jerusalem on his burak. A burak is the body of a horse, and a kind of figure of an angel. And it took Prophet Muhammad of Islam from Mecca to Jerusalem, where he prayed, and from Jerusalem to the heavens. And there he received the order of 5 prayers a day in Islam. And for sure that the way back from the heavens to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem to Mecca again. The whole compound is known as Al-Aqsa Mosque, but you can differentiate many buildings, and each of the buildings are considered, or most of them are considered as mosques, such as the Dome of the Rock, such as Al-Aqsa Mosque, such as Al-Marwani Mosque, such as Al-Buraq Mosque, which is a small one. And all of them are too much important. They are one compound, and the whole area is sacred for everybody, mainly for Muslims, as the most holy shrines of Muslims in the country, in Palestine, is in that area.
Yeah.
And this area is making about 1/5 or 1/6 of the old city of Jerusalem.
Right. And you know, I went to school there when I was a kid. That used to be my summer camp. I spent a year in elementary school there, and I tell sometimes when I'm guiding with Morgie, which we've guided together, I like to tell the story of how the 5 prayers were ordained. And I don't know if you actually know this story of the prophet going up to heaven and God ordering him how many times to pray. And when he came down, he met with Moses, and he told Moses that God have asked him to pray 50 times a day. And Moses convinced Muhammad to go and negotiate with God. And he went up and he negotiated with God to 45. And then Moses told him again, 45 is not going to work. And he goes up and down until eventually it goes down to 5 times. And it's still today, every prayer in a mosque counts as a 50 prayers in Islam because of that story, because it was supposed to be a 50 prayers. And so every time a Muslim is praying in a mosque, it counts as 50. And if you pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque, it counts as 500 prayers, which makes it even more. So when I was a kid, I loved that story, because I thought if I pray once in Al-Aqsa Mosque, that's enough for the whole month, which I learned later I was wrong. And as it's Ramadan now time, I remember my teachers yelling at me and telling me I was a twisted-minded kid.
Innovative, creative.
Thank you. That as well. I was being innovative. I wonder what are the stories you grew up hearing about that place, Morgie, and how, maybe, let me ask it differently. I just shared a story, and I know that story actually has a similar story in the Bible, where somebody negotiates with God. And I wonder how working together, maybe these stories kind of how, I know how we think about it as conflicting narratives, but having two tour guides isn't always conflicting narratives. Sometimes it's not, it's a fluid. So how does that work for you?
Oh, you're asking me, okay. I think it's very often complementary. First of all, guiding normally is a very lonely job because you're doing it alone. You may have a staff, you may not have staff. And when you have a partner, that's a very human thing that's great. You know, we have to sit, we have to talk, we figure out who's saying what, where, what, to do a little coordination. But not being alone, for me, that's very important. And particularly when I'm working with a Palestinian that, you know, was not supposed to be my enemy, that's my ally. And I think that relationship and working together, and I've always found it a very respectful two-way street. I think modeling, without meaning to, we are modeling that to all of the clients and very much showing there is another way, the sane human way. And for me, that is the best part of it, besides all of the things I learned. Like, I didn't know this story of the, you know, 500 times and 50 and all of that. And now that's part of my dialogue when I'm, you know, not having a partner, but I can share that story. So I've only gained and grown by learning a lot. And then on the personal level, I have a lot more friends now.
I'm sure everyone is glad to have you as a friend and a co-guide. How do you make travelers passionate about a different faith that they're not, you know, they're not coming with, they're not expecting necessarily to learn about a different religion, and there are a lot of intersections. So how do you connect the travelers? Ramzi?
Well, I guess coming to the country, I guess these travelers are already passionate by the country, and they would like to hear to somebody talking about the country. And here it comes your personality, your style, how you do it. I myself, I used to do it always in one style. Talking about the difference, for sure. Mention that we are always different from each other. Secondly, I try always to say, I'm not alone here. You might hear this and that and whatever. But my here I'm trying to open your minds to think in a different way. In this way, I always ask many questions for my groups that I guide. I give information. Later on, I give information. Later on, I ask another question. And I can feel that really some of my clients are too much passionate, and they would like to answer very quickly. They have the right answer. Some give the wrong answer. And then here I told them, you went in the trap, you gave the wrong answer, never mind, but this way you will remember always what is this place is about.
So you're luring them in slowly.
Let's go way around. Morgie, I wonder sometimes if we flip and try to share the other narrative and how that works. So for example, if we look at the Dome of the Rock, I could ask you instead of Ramzi, why is this so important for Muslims other than the night journey? I mean, as a building, architecture-wise, what's so important, the history of this specific building?
I think there's, when we talk about importance and passion, we have to be very aware of what is the narrative that these people grew up with, and what is the importance of a narrative in terms of self-identity and national identity. I would say today the importance of this site has gotten magnified enormously because of politics. And I would say in many ways, people are often passionate about their own narratives, which makes a lot of sense, particularly if there's a religious bent. And I would say not only the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome, but also the Kotel and Jerusalem for Jews and for Muslims has been used as symbols and misused, in my opinion, by religious leaders and political leaders on all sides. All right, and so this has now become a symbol that is enormous passion. If we looked at what happened in July, I think it was 2017, when unfortunately two Israelis were killed, the Israelis put up metal detectors, and the Palestinians wouldn't recognize that, you know, they're not in control of who goes up there. And the Palestinians had in general, peaceful protest for 3 weeks. They wouldn't go up on the dome, and they just clogged the streets all around Jerusalem for 3 weeks during Friday prayers and just prayed in the streets. And this was everyone, not just the religious people. Everyone was out there. The taxi driver, the drug dealer, everyone was out there because this was Al-Aqsa, and that's the passion level. All right. And I think, to me, that is looking at it from a very modern perspective, not historically, but what's going on today. I don't know if that was what you were, that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, Jerusalem is a controversial place. It's a place that it's fun, it's great, it has so much history, but it's also, like you said, everything is an issue in Jerusalem, because wherever you dig, you're gonna have a problem. Whatever you do, you're gonna have a problem, because it's just, I mean, within 1 square kilometer, you have the holiest sites of multiple faiths. And
it doesn't have to be a problem. I think that's part of the message or the dream or the vision that I think I have and you have and Ramzi and all of us that work with MEJDI are trying to say, there is another way. Let's look at it. Let's just calm down and breathe. Yes, be passionate, but maybe there's a different way of expressing that.
Yes. Well, Kim.
No, yeah, I'm sure we wanted to say the same thing because both of our names is Kim Passy. I thought let's continue with the tour itself. Ramzi, I know you wanted to talk about an additional Christian site, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Go ahead.
Yes, for sure, for sure. When I show the old city from the Mount of Olives, I show first the golden dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or the Dome of the Rock, I'm sorry. And I always show immediately the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with the 2 domes it has. And what we see in the picture right now is one of the domes, which is called the Dome of the Church of the Middle of the World. Geographically, Jerusalem might be in the middle of the Middle East, in the middle of Israel and Palestine, in the middle, and the church is in the middle of Jerusalem. It's possible, even though we can, the geographical measures have been changed since America was discovered. This was an old story. Yeah, Let me go back to the Holy Sepulchre Church. The Holy Sepulchre Church is the most important church for Christians all over the world. Because here, many are suffering, and he.
Can you say that again, Ramzi? We lost you for a second. Okay, we're having technical issue with Ramzi. I can say, I think you were saying that this is the holiest place because it's the site of the burial and resurrection of Jesus, and I'm waiting for Ramzi to be able to come back, hopefully to share this. But it's one of the sites I think I had the most funny story once. Is I was with Hussam and Yuval. Hussam was a Palestinian guide, Yuval was the Israeli guide, and we got to the church, and instead of the Israeli and the Palestinians kind of arguing about two different points of view, which sometimes that's the whole idea of having dual narrative, you give different points of view. Yuval didn't have much really to argue about there, but Hussam and I did. Now, both of us grew up in Muslim families. The difference, Hussam went to a Catholic school and I went to a Protestant school. And so when we stood in front of the church, Hussam started giving the Catholic view of the church. And he was very passionate that you couldn't believe he's not Catholic. And part of the thing he said, how he feels a little even offended when people come from outside and say, well, we don't know if this is really the site. And he said, what do you mean you don't know? For 1700 years, we believe this is a site. And then some foreigner comes and says, there's a place called the Garden Tomb that's been found only 150 years ago. This is so unfair. And I responded, because I went to a Protestant school, I responded, I'm sorry, this is not accurate because there is a very good evidence that it could be elsewhere. And anyway, it doesn't matter where the crucifixion resurrection happens, it's the whole idea of it. And here two people who grew up in a Muslim home are arguing about the site of where Jesus was crucified and resurrected, buried and resurrected. And our group, I think, were completely confused. And the good thing about it is, I think, Morgie, you said earlier, this is not really a dual narrative. This is a multiple narrative. And sometimes the two Israelis can have more disagreement, and sometimes the two Palestinians might have to disagree, can have a disagreement as well.
Yeah, when we're doing this discussion, I don't know what happened to Ramzi. I'm like, come back, Ramzi. But I think he's having some technical challenges there. That I always stress that I am not representing the Jewish narrative. There is no Jewish narrative. There's a spectrum. And I try to suggest as many different pictures of that spectrum as we can. Just as, the example you just gave within Christianity, there are many different spectrums and narratives. So when we say multi, there's layers of that, like Shrek,
Right, absolutely. And I'm sure if I ask you and Kim multiple stories, it would be, I'll get different answers. And we talked, Ramzi isn't, I think, able to join us back, so maybe I'll take Ramzi's place here as your dual narrative tour guide.
I'll just say that this is maybe Aziz's plan. He loves to guide, and it might be something that he planned along the way. So yeah, I'll introduce you now as Aziz, the Palestinian guide on our tour today.
Yeah, and I've had the privilege and joy of working many times with Aziz. So
no, and it's always fun. Well, I wanted to say that I think in addition to that, one of our roles often is to be a facilitator. And people don't think of tour guides as facilitators, but in our trips, when we give that kind of tour, you and I in Jerusalem, or you and Ramzi, you mentioned City of David, for example, and City of David is a very controversial place. And one of the things we try to do is, instead of us giving that controversial story, letting the people there do it. So we meet with somebody from City of David, and we meet from somebody from Silwan, the Palestinian village there. And there's a huge contrast of the story, where when you come to where we are, what we're looking at now, this used to be a parking lot, for example, for the community, which barely has any parking lots. And so when it was dug, they lost that parking spot. Now, I understand the importance of archaeology, but there is stories. I visited houses where people say their homes are suffering because of the digs. And how do you, Morgie, deal with those emotions and conflicting narratives? And how do you change it from being a tour guide, I guess, to being a facilitator in those moments?
Well, personally, that's my background is education, and part of what I've also done is facilitate. So for me, that's not a big challenge. But one of the things I think is important that I've learned, particularly with working with other MEJDI guides, is to frame it before you go to these places and say, you are probably going to hear things you may not agree with. This is not the time to argue. This is not the time to try and convince anyone. This is the time to listen so you can begin to hear. And then we will have a session afterwards to discuss all these things that may come up for you. So I think that, you know, by framing it in the beginning, to try and encourage the clients to be open to hearing and know they may be uncomfortable, and know that they are going to have a place, a safe environment to discuss this afterwards.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Of all the sites in Jerusalem, what's your favorite to guide in?
Oh man, I love it all. It's really hard. I like the old city. I'd say the old city, there is so much to see and to feel and to use every one of your senses. I like to eat my way through the market, sampling this, sampling that. That's why I look the way I do. But to feel the energy and to really pay attention to what's going on. Not just looking at what used to be hundreds of tour groups. I'd be happy for one tourist. That notice the people living there. What's going on? Pay attention to the sights, the sounds, the smells. But this is where people live. This is where we got to get the kids to school, take out the garbage, deal with the neighbors. Plus, in the old city, I've got 10,000 tourists running through my neighborhood every day. What's going on here? And just try and feel the energy. So I really love the old city, with all of the different, you know, the Jewish section, Christian neighborhood, Muslim neighborhood. I just love it.
And unfortunately, Ramzi isn't here to answer this question too. But can you tell us a bit about what you learn when you work with another guide? What is most unique about it?
I think I've touched on it a little bit. The camaraderie.
Second, Morgie, maybe while you're doing that, if anybody has a question, start thinking about it, sending it to us.
Right, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I think more of like maybe if you use a story that you've heard from one of the guides that you've been guiding with, and you use it, you know, on your next trip, or.
Yeah, as I mentioned with the, you know, Muhammad going up to Allah, you know, 550, you know, it's negotiations. That's why in the Middle East, no one takes an answer as an answer, even from God, you know. Yes, so learning those stories. Ramzi, you're here.
Ramzi's back.
Yay, let's let Ramzi.
Ramzi, maybe you can tell us if there are any stories that you've taken from one of the Israeli guides that you've worked with towards a future tour.
Well, I remember one of the stories I learned, one of my Israeli colleagues was with Aviv at the Golgotha itself in the Holy Sepulchre Church on the crucifixion place. The way he did compare the hill where Jesus was crucified on the place that was called the skull. And he was referring always to the Temple Mount area and how King Herod built the mountain. He made a kind of building on the top of the skull that way. And when Jesus was crucified, he was crucified on that place called the skull. And he was comparing as well by Abraham's sacrifice and the sacrifice or the death of Jesus on the cross of that area. And everybody, when he goes there, he can notice the tableau of Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac that happened at the Mount Moriah. This is one of the good stories I have learned from my friend Aviv.
And we have tons of questions. So how about Kim? I'll choose one, you choose one, and we go back and forth. And I'm trying to decide how to. So somebody here is asking, how are these tours are different if the tour groups are all one faith as opposed if the group is a multi-faith group, an interfaith group? How is it different, or do you do things differently based on that? Morgie?
So my response is, I think that mostly has to deal with facilitation and sensitivities within the group. I know that very often it's a multi-faith group, usually Christian, Jewish, but sometimes there's been Christian, Jewish, Muslim. And then people get very passionate and very sensitive, and you need to build into the itinerary time for processing. And I think that's one of the things that MEJDI is very aware of. And depending if the group comes with a spiritual leader, they will often do the facilitation. Sometimes we will. It just depends what the group needs are, but to be sensitive to that.
Right. And I think one of the things that are important is realizing everyone has a different need. Not every group needs to see the same thing, and not every group has to go to the same sites. If anything, there are sites I think we only go to see because others go to see, and sometimes worth it to say, let's do less and really have a time where we appreciate the site and the conversation. Kim?
Yeah, another sensitivity I think is between the guides. How do you deal with triggers when the other guide says something that is emotional to you or is difficult for you to hear? Someone asked if you get training for it, but I guess it's also something that you learn to deal with through time. Ramzi? I think Ramzi's still having difficulties. Morgie, if you want to go ahead.
Ramzi, can you hear? Did you get that? It's
I
frozen.
can hear. Do you hear me?
Yeah, so would you answer that
Yeah.
one? About if like you and I disagree,
Okay.
how do we do?
Nope.
Again, it depends on the relationship. I know with Aziz, he and I had one or two issues, and I was able to talk to him about it, and he really heard. And then the next time that he forgot what I said, I hit him. But and I did. You remember that, right? But playfully, because we're basically nonviolent. But again, that is part of the beauty of the relationship. it is our responsibility to talk to each other. And if I say something that, you know, bugs Aziz, he'll talk to me. And if it's a little thing, then we can do it right in front of the group and it's okay. If it's a big thing, we would do it, you know, professionally, quietly.
Yeah. And I remember that specific moment when I did what I did. And to me, it's really important. I think you'll learn also from your own mistakes, because it made me more aware when I went on the next tour that, okay, I need to make sure I don't do the same mistake again. And I'm respectful and mindful of the other guy. And it goes, there's no way you're gonna work with somebody 10 days and not at some point step over. You know, you talked a bit longer than me. You didn't see me when we ate lunch. I don't know, something is gonna happen. You're working with this person day and night, literally. I mean, you meet at 7 in the morning, sometimes you leave each other at 10 at night. And so something is gonna go wrong. And as long as you're open to communication and willing to say, I'm sorry, and I think we know we care about each other. This is more of a community than random people that we just put together. We're able to normally overcome it. And it's not only, I would say, just the two tour guides, also with the drivers. It's a three-way, which also you have to make sure they are part of this conversation.
And every speaker that you meet along the way, and you know, it's a whole lot.
Speakers I listen to that, I'm like, oh my goodness, but I never argue with speakers on the tour, because it is their right and their time to speak. And I don't want to sway the group on opinion. I want them to really hear it and to really breathe in what everybody is saying, and not to be like, here's what I think and you all need to agree with me. I'll say, if you do that, you destroy the whole idea of multiple narrative.
100%. Morgie, one of the listeners is asking if there are sites that you feel that travelers should go to that aren't on enough of our itineraries.
Again, it really depends, you know, for Jewish groups, I might say one thing, for Christian groups, another, for a multi-narrative. One of the sites that I also really love is the Southern Wall Excavations that not all groups go to, and I just don't get that, because that's important to Jews and Christians, and it's also, you know, right next to the mosque, and it's great stories, but not all groups go, particularly Christian groups that don't go there. I go like, Jesus walked here. What, I mean, hello? But, you know, I don't know, maybe the priest or the pastor or whoever didn't want it. And
Ramzi, maybe we can hear you when you're without video.
Ramzi?
Yes.
Okay.
What question shall I answer?
Let's one for you. There are so many. This is the most questions I think we've ever got that I don't know.
It's true.
Here's one. What are other locations in the West Bank that are most compelling and conflicting multiple narratives? Jericho, Nablus, Hebron. What's the most compelling multiple narrative site in the West Bank? Ramzi.
Well, I guess the whole West Bank itself. Everywhere you go in the West Bank, you can have a dual narrative. And mainly that the West Bank is filled with many Israeli settlements. So you have, you can talk about how these people on the top of the hills are thinking and how they are seeing the country, and how these people who are living in these old villages in the West Bank, these cities, how they live on their way as well. And sometimes how they have the conflict between each other. And sometimes life goes normally between both of the two sides. Wherever you go, you can have a dual narrative in the West Bank, I guess.
That's an interesting way to look at it, I think. Aziz, someone was asking about MEJDI, the name MEJDI, how we chose it and what it means.
It's, you know, MEJDI in Arabic, it comes from the word majd, which means glory and respect. And the idea is to respect travelers, people where we travel to, and the environment, the place that we travel to. We didn't think enough when we chose the name that it's going to be really hard for people to pronounce it and spell it. So many people write it MEDJI, or which is so
MA. Israelis write MA. They say, I sent you the email. I tell them, can you tell me what email you sent it to? He says, yes, Kim@MAJDI.
The other hand, I think people remember us because our name is weird, which is, you know, a lot of other tours, it's planned tours. I'm like, yeah, there's a million Holy Land tours. How do you know which company you're even talking about? So yeah, that's a good answer.
I think subconsciously you picked the perfect name. You know, talk about glory and respect, and it's difficult to say it, to spell it, and doing this is difficult. So I think it just fits perfectly.
Well, Morgie, there's a question about what sites do you think are often used to weaponize and push for a certain belief, where you go there to, I don't know, solidify your already opinion, or the tour is pushing you toward a certain opinion? Are there sites like that?
If you go to the City of David and have their tour, that's not always. It really does depend who the guide is, but they're all, you know, they have an agenda. That's very, very clear. That's one of the first ones that pops into my mind. But, you know, I could say the same thing for if you went on a tour in Hebron of Breaking Silence, they have their agenda too. And that's why I think it's important to see as many of those sites as possible with local guides, hearing all of the different narratives. You know, when groups go to Efrat and talk to the mayor, he has his agenda.
And I think that's probably the, maybe not the #1 job that you're doing, but framing the whole trip is a big part of the tour itself. Every person that talks adds more information, and as you were saying before, listening doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with something, but listen to it and then we'll process it. And that's something that you'll see on all of our tours.
I think somebody's gonna join us. Is that still happening? Let's see. Somebody offered to join and say something live about her trip. So Janine, do you wanna say hello to everybody here?
I would be happy to. I'm not sure who in the audience has participated in a multi-narrative tour. I have with Aziz and someone else, his partner, and it was extraordinary. I can't imagine visiting Israel and the West Bank without there being this multi-narrative. The tour was recommended, I'm Christian, the tour was recommended to me by a Jewish family, and they were so impressed with the program that I said, this is the way to go. And I found the tour that I could take. I highly, highly recommend it. I don't think it would be fair, frankly, to visit the area without having the broad perspective that the multi-narrative tour gives. So bravo.
Janine, a lot of people, when I talk to them about like visit in this way, and doesn't obviously, I don't want to turn this into a promotion for MEJDI with other companies as well. A lot of times when I tell people about when you visit in the same, they say, I don't want to deal with politics. I only want to see the holy sites and that's it. How do you respond to somebody like that? I wonder, because you come as a person of faith who cares about visiting the people, the places that are holy, but you also wanted to do more. So I wonder how you respond to that.
Let me state first of all that it's not just my holy site, Christian holy sites. It's everyone's holy site. And it's very difficult, I think, to separate visiting the holy sites without talking about the politics of it, without arguing one side or another, although I will say that I came away with a very strong opinion politically. We happened to be there during the move of the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And I was enraged because I saw personal opinion here, obviously, I saw Jerusalem as an international city and I think what the United States did, we've talked about a number of times in the media. If they only want, they may be very disappointed if they only want to visit the holy sites. I think that it's short-sighted, but then again, I'm interested in the dynamics of the whole area.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's helpful, but
that tour, we had to move our hotel from Tel Aviv to the last couple of days to I think Herzliya, because there was a lot of tension, and our hotel was right next to the American Embassy in Tel Aviv. I was guiding that trip with Elad Vezana, who's also another one of our amazing guides.
I'll just say that we are, Ramzi was talking about optimism, and hopefully with the coronavirus, we can be optimistic and hope that even this year we'll still be traveling or traveling again. I can say that in Tel Aviv, at least, they're starting to open things up a little bit slowly, step by step, and hopefully that will move forward and not take us 100 steps back. But that's something we're all hoping for, I guess. Well, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to Morgie and Ramzi, our wonderful guides. Love to have you with us today, and I'm sure that our listeners feel the same. And our future travelers, for sure, will enjoy traveling with you. Just a little bit about next week. We are moving into different times. We're doing only Thursdays moving forward. But for this Monday, Aziz, do you want to tell us a bit about the Palestinian-Israeli memorial ceremony?
Absolutely. This Monday, I would really encourage everyone to join the joint memorial. It's usually this is the Israeli Memorial Day, but a few organizations, especially the Combatants for Peace and the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum, have decided about 10 years ago to start doing a joint memorials, which means to honor everybody who died, was killed in this conflict, whether they're Israelis or Palestinians. And this year, the event is going to be online, so you can join and learn more, hear stories about people who've lost their family members in the conflict. And after the event, there'll be multiple rooms that you can join and ask questions and talk to a bereaved person as well. I will be speaking in one of those meeting rooms as well. And so I think supporting this initiative and being part of it is very important. We'll appreciate anybody who joins. And then the next show we are doing next Thursday, 1 p.m., same as we've done today. It will be with two people who are members of the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum, but we chose two of the youngest people in the organization, Arab Aramin and Yigal Al-Hanan. I've known both of them since they were kids because their parents have been part of the organization for a while, and so they In some ways, it grew up in the organization, and they both have incredible stories of transformation. Both have become very close friends, and I truly love these two men. I think when I think about the future and think about hope and think about things going differently, these are the young people I think about as the future leaders.
Thanks, Aziz. So more interesting conversations to come, and we hope that you'll join us for them. We also have our photo competition like we have every week. This time we're asking for you to send pictures of holy sites with a short caption and to the email info@mejditours.com by this Saturday. And on next week's episode, we'll say who the winner is, and of course, the winner will be receiving Aziz's book. You know, we have a picture of it. We'll show it in a second, but we'll also have all of this up on our Facebook page and on our website. So stay tuned for that. So thanks again for everyone that has joined us. We appreciate you listening in and hope that you'll join us in the future as well.
Yeah, and again,
thank you so much.
Physically distant, but we stay socially connected with each other.